All right, let's talk about a piece of software that, for millions of us, is basically a core memory from school. You might love it, you might hate it, but you've almost definitely heard of it. Turnitin. I mean, seriously, if you've ever uploaded an essay at midnight, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best, you've probably stared down the barrel of this digital gatekeeper. But is it just a simple tool to keep us honest, or is there a whole lot more going on beneath the surface? Let's get into it. So first things first, let's talk about Turnitin's reputation as the unofficial plagiarism police, and you really have to understand just how big this thing is to get the full picture. So what is it? Well, on paper, it's pretty straightforward. It's a similarity detection service. You or your professor uploads a paper, and the software scans it against this absolutely enormous database. Then it spits out a report, highlighting any text that matches something else. Seems simple, right? Well, the skill here is just mind-blowing. This isn't some niche software tucked away in a few classrooms. We're talking about over 16,000 schools, universities, you name it. That covers more than 71 million students. It's not just a tool, it's practically part of the global education system. And yeah, it is big, big business. Check out that number, $1.75 billion. That's how much it was bought for back in 2019. When you see a price tag like that, you know this is way more than just a teaching aid. It's a massive commercial giant. So that begs the question, right? How does this thing actually work? What's going on inside that digital black box when it scans your paper? What is it even checking against? Let's crack it open and see. Okay, so its algorithm is basically looking in three huge buckets. First, it scrapes and saves pretty much the entire public internet. Second, it's got deals to scan a giant library of copyrighted stuff. We're talking books, news articles, and millions of academic papers. And third, and this is the one that causes all the drama, it scans every single student paper that's ever been submitted to it. And when I say every student paper, I mean it. As of mid-2025, that student archive holds 1.9 billion papers. Billion, with a B. So your essay doesn't just get checked, it gets absorbed. It becomes a permanent part of the database. And that, right there, is where things start to get really, really interesting. Because the second your work becomes a permanent part of their machine, it opens up this huge can of worms. And that brings us to the next big question, the question of rights. We're talking about huge legal and privacy fights over who actually owns and controls student work. Let's just ask it plainly. This company stores and uses almost 2 billion student essays to power its for-profit business. But does it actually have the right to do that without paying the students who wrote them in the first place? It really boils down to this legal showdown. On one side, Turnitin says, hey, this is fair use. We're just using the papers to check future papers for originality. But on the other side, critics are saying, no way. You're copying the entire work and using it for your own commercial gain. That's a classic copyright violation. And here's the kicker. A US appeals court actually sided with Turnitin, ruling that it is fair use. But the fight isn't just about copyright. You've also got major privacy concerns. Up in Canada, for instance, some universities flat out banned the service. Why? Because Turnitin's servers are in the US, and they were worried that the USA PATRIOT Act could give the US government a backdoor to access Canadian students' personal data and their written work. So all of this legal stuff leads to an even bigger question. What about the actual student experience? Does forcing everyone to use the software create a classroom atmosphere of guilty until proven innocent? And now, with AI in the mix, things are getting even messier. I mean, this is the core ethical argument you hear from a lot of students, and even some professors. They feel that making Turnitin mandatory basically starts the conversation with an accusation. It shifts the dynamic from trust to suspicion. And listen, this isn't just a philosophical debate. Students have actually pushed back and won. At McGill University in Canada, students organized and refused to submit their papers to the service. And you know what? They won. The university had to agree to grade their work without it. Okay, now for the latest chapter, AI. Early in 2023, Turnitin rolled out its big AI detector to catch text from stuff like ChatGPT. But it didn't take long for problems to pop up. By the end of the year, some universities were already turning the feature off because they just didn't trust it. Then in 2024, stories started coming out about students getting flagged for using totally normal writing tools, like Grammarly. Now, Turnitin says its AI detector has a false positive rate of about 1%. And, 99% accuracy sounds fantastic. But Think about it. When you are scanning millions and millions of papers, a 1% error rate means thousands of students could be wrongly accused of cheating, and that's an accusation that can totally derail an academic career. So, for this last part, let's talk about the software itself. Is it really the infallible plagiarism buster it's made out to be? Turns out there are some pretty well-documented cracks in the armor. Academic research has shown pretty clearly that you can fool the software. People have shown that using weird text encodings or funky custom fonts can just completely confuse the scanner. But maybe more importantly, other studies found that Turnitin is often totally blind to text that's just been run through one of those free online paraphrasing websites. And it's not just about what it misses, it's about what it gets wrong. You get these false positives. A study way back in 2009 showed that the software frequently flags things that aren't plagiarism at all. It's just, the common language and technical terms you have to use to write about a certain subject. It struggles to tell the difference between cheating and just sounding like an expert. And then there are criticisms of the business model itself. For one, the source code is a total secret. No one outside the company can independently check how their detection algorithm actually works. And for a while, they also ran a service called WriteCheck, where students could pay to check their own papers against the database before turning them in, which, as you can imagine, led to a lot of people accusing them of basically arming both sides of the plagiarism war just to make a buck. Which brings us right back to where we started. Is Turnitin a necessary tool? Maybe a flawed one, but a necessary one for keeping academics honest? Or is it a billion-dollar machine built on the backs of student work, one that operates on a foundation of suspicion? Now, in the age of AI, figuring out how we even define originality is a debate that's more important and more complicated than it's ever been.